Number 1. The answer phone message. My partner and I live in a studio apartment in the middle of the city in a main town in New Zealand. Some weird things had been happening at home, like dark man handprints on the high wall, which we couldn't explain. We're both ladies, to name one. One day we were out together and my partner checked her phone to notice she'd missed a call. She checked who from, and it was our home number. She'd been a few minutes too late to answer. There was a message, so curiously we called up the answer service to see what on earth this was. The message was a hang-up, that's all. Our phone did not have the ability to program numbers and my partner's phone was new. We'd never dialed her cell from the home phone before. We went home a little confused and a bit scared, and everything was in its place. Nothing touched at all, and no reason to believe anyone had been there. We were 8 floors up, so no one would have been able to break in through any windows, and there were no side doors as the apartment was really small. To this day, we have no idea who or what called us from our own home phone. Number 2. 3 knocks around 3:30 a.m. I'm not really sure if this is where this belongs, but I wanted to post this somewhere to find out what happened. So I decided to take a shower because it was really hot in my room. I live in a desert and it's hot at night too. So I got out of bed and took my phone with me to the bathroom. Usually I put Pandora on, but for some reason I forgot this time and just hopped in the shower and started cleaning myself. When I heard 3 soft knocks spaced out by a few seconds, and I heard them twice, I think. At first, I thought someone broke in because my mum was in bed asleep, and I knew my window was wide open, and the screen is easy to pop off place because I often forget my keys and need to go through my window. I'm not too big or frightening. I'm only around 5'8" and have a baby face, so I knew I couldn't scare anyone off. So I stayed locked in the bathroom for a few minutes before getting out, drying off, and checking time before turning the flashlight on my phone and checking the house. No one was inside any room except my mum passed out on her bed and my dogs in the living room. I checked my window and everything, but again, nothing. So I texted a friend around 3:30 in the morning and told him about it, and he told me about something he saw on the TV about 3 knocks meant something about a demon, so now I'm paranoid. Am I or anyone else I know gonna die, or what? Number 3. I didn't believe in ghosts until this happened. Okay, so my partner, let's call him Dan for the sake of the story, of 5 years, and I are travelling out of town to Santa Rosa, California, to see a friend who's staying with her boyfriend just this past weekend. She was also from the same city we were from, and it was going to be her last time hanging out with us before she moved in with him and started her new life. We hit some bars with her boyfriend as a designated driver and we get drunk. We get crazy and Dan and I get dropped off at our hotel at a little past 2 in the morning. Just a little later, I want to say about 3 a.m, Dan woke up in tears. I was a little annoyed because he tends to get emotional when he's drunk and our plans were to get up early and head out to San Francisco the following day. Babe, there's something in here with us. What? I thought he was just being delusional. Yeah, she says her name's Maria Sanchez. And he points to the far end of the bed. And she's standing right there, he sobs. Can't you see her? I looked. No. Dan started describing her. She was a Hispanic woman who wore an older style of clothing, probably from the 60s or 70s, and with short dark curly hair. Her neck was a dark purple. Perhaps she died of asphyxiation, he suggests. Anyways, he explains to me she is sad, He explains to me she is a sad lone spirit. I was annoyed with his description, as it was keeping me up, so I scolded him. Well, tell that bitch to go away. Dos pendejos. That's what she's saying, cried Dan. What does that mean? Okay, so I know my partner doesn't know Spanish, not even basic Spanish. In fact, I speak another language I tried teaching him, but it failed as he didn't remember much of what I've taught him. And as for myself, I studied Spanish a little while, but not seriously enough to be fluent. Anyway, I was a little freaked out. How did Dan know those Spanish words? So I started talking him a little bit more seriously. So between the ghost, Dan, and myself, we had a long conversation. I apologized. Lo siento. I then asked her, the spirit, to leave, which she refused to do. I tried to get a hold of our friend and see if we could possibly leave and stay with her and her boyfriend instead of the rest of the night, but she never picked up. Could you blame her? It was 3 a.m. Anyways, through Dan, he told me she was searching for her 2 children and asked if we could help her find them. Throughout the conversation, Dan also mentioned she called us dos míos and dos muchachos, and this part makes my skin crawl. He started blurting slurred phrases in Spanish that were too advanced for me to understand. So how does this make sense? Dan knows no Spanish. Dan started crying again. If we leave her, we will die, she says. And then it gets a little freaky. Dan got really quiet, and as he laid in the bed of our hotel room, his eyelids started flickering, and his eyes are rolled back, and he starts yelling and shouting these almost diabolic sounding phrases in Spanish. It was like a scene right out of a movie. I froze. I was scared stiff because I knew right then what was happening. Dan had gotten possessed. He came to. What just happened? He panicked. I didn't know how to explain it to him. I was so scared, but I told him. We're packing up and we're leaving now. It was 4 a.m. Dan then told me the ghost apologized and for us not to leave, and that we were good boys, and she would like for us to spend the night. Hell fucking no, we're sticking around. Not after that little possession show. We packed up and left and headed out because there was no way we were going to spend the rest of our night there. I go to the lobby to check out and explain to the receptionist that there was some freaky shit going on in that room and we needed to leave. The receptionist apologized and said maybe it was a prank from the people from the next room over. I was like, no, the things that happened in there and the things I saw in there was no way Dan magically learned Spanish, and the way his eyes looked when he was possessed. It gave me the chills just thinking about it. I honestly don't even know if we grabbed everything from that hotel room. We spent the night. I honestly don't know if we grabbed everything from that hotel room we spent the night in, but we knew we weren't going back in that room, and it was out of our budget to get another hotel, so I made the decision to drive us back home, even though it would be a 5-hour drive. Dan was so shaken as we were driving home, saying things like, "She says we're going to die, babe. And what if she follows us? And what if she followed us?" I replied, "No, we won't." And I had hoped she hadn't latched onto Dan somehow. But yes, I drove us back home. I was so tired, but we made it back home, and we lived to tell the story. I've never been a believer of ghosts, but this experience has changed my mind. Number 4. The Lights. I've always wanted to believe in the supernatural, but never had any first-hand experiences. A few months ago, I went camping and things changed. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget the details, and shared it with my friend. She told me I should share it with you guys. The woods were darker than I remember. Or maybe it was that I had grown accustomed to the city lights. It never got too dark in the city. The most you could see on a clear night were 10 stars. I treasured those and looked for them whenever I could. But out there in the woods it was dark, very dark. The sky was blanketed by a weary mist that drowned out the starlight. It was at the end of a long day of driving. We had left about 10 a.m. that morning with the hope of arriving at the campsite close to 3 p.m, but with our luck we arrived at 5 p.m. As the last bit of sunlight abandoned the river on what would be the hottest day of the camping trip. After the sun went down, the fog rolled in. We didn't even get a chance to see the stars. We were hanging out with our friends around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and threatening to sing campfire songs to each other, when the fog stopped chirping. Out by the riverbank there was a flash of light. It looked like a flashlight, so we all chalked it up to kids playing down by the riverbank. A couple of minutes later, the fog started up again. I looked up towards the river, but the light was gone, so I didn't think of it again. A few hours passed before the fog stopped chirping again. The silence was deafening to me, other than our loud conversations and the crackling of the campfire. You could even had heard a pin drop. I looked out across the hundreds of feet of river stones to the tall cliff and saw two lights. They looked like they were by the riverbank, but they seemed peculiar. It wasn't like when people hold flashlights. I stood up and walked closer to the riverbank. No one else was as curious as I was. I've always wanted to experience the supernatural, and never have before, so I was completely absorbed by their odd movements. The lights didn't shine down at the stones like a person would, so they could see stones like we had earlier that afternoon. The light source seemed to be pointing at us as they moved slowly, methodically, down the river's edge. It was as if a person was floating above the stones and watching us, staring at us. I walked closer to the edge of camp to see if I was imagining it, and maybe, if I was closer, I would be able to confirm the flashlights or torches, or whatever it was human. But as I stared at them, the lights seemed to notice each other. They flew into the sky like they were attached to birds, but that was impossible. They flew from one side of our view of the riverbank to the complete opposite side. It was like they were meeting up with each other. Then they separated again to opposite sides of the river. It was faster than birds. In mere seconds they had travelled hundreds of feet. I stared at them and rubbed my eyes before I panicked and ran back to my camp. My friend Leah and her boyfriend Jake were the only two people in my campsite who believed me. The three of us stood by the edge of the camp, just inside the last ring of light from our lanterns, when a third light appeared above the other two. We stood silently watching as the lights moved along the river. It was similar to the way a person would walk, but there was no way a person could move that smoothly over rocky terrain. A person would stumble or lose their footing in the dark. The lights turned to each other again, then abruptly they flew up. They stopped high up in the sky above the canyon and scattered to opposite sides of the riverbank again. It was too fast. Leah said the lights scared her so much that she couldn't watch with us anymore and ran back to the safety of the campsite. Right after she did, the third light went out. It didn't go away into the forest. It didn't go into the water. It turned off like a switch. Jake and I watched the lights silently, unnerved, waiting for them to do something else ghostly and unnatural. After a while of lights walking slowly along the bank, the second light shut off. Part of me was relieved and part of me was disappointed, but Jake had a headlamp on, so he shined it at the lights, flashing on and off 3 times. The second light turned back on, and the first light flashed back at him 3 times. He flashed his headlamp again, and the light flashed back and began to grow larger. They were coming towards us. I started to panic. The one thing I did not want to meet face to face was coming towards our campsite. I grabbed Jake's arm and we ran back to the safety of the campfire. It was later when I was reading what the lights could have been, whether ghosts, fairies, or aliens, that a story popped out at me. The story said that the ghosts of Native Americans would coax campers away from safety. The story said the way you could tell that they were ghosts of these Native Americans was that the number of lights would match the number of people going to die. It was then that I realized that when it had just been me watching, there was just one light by the riverbank, but it went up to 3 lights when I grabbed 2 friends to join me. When my friend ran away because she was scared, the 3rd light shut off. When we went back to the camp, the lights disappeared. I don't know what they were, but I feel as though the lights matched those that believed in the supernatural. Now I can't stop thinking, what would have happened if we had followed the lights? Number 5. Something in the Nevada forest. About a year ago, a few friends and myself decided to go into the woods to take some cool pictures with our new speed lights, flashes that go on top of the cameras like you'd see a wedding photographer use. We drove about 30 minutes northwest of Las Vegas into Kyle Canyon. We stopped at a place where I have explored before with a few slot canyons and caves. When I first explored it, I was alone and I had a very uneasy feeling about the area, but I denounced it as me just being scared. We arrived around 10 p.m. It was a very dark night. The moon wasn't very bright that night. We made a few jokes about there being no cell phone reception and to not get killed up here because nobody will find us. We made our way into the slot canyons when one of our friends, who had never touched a nice camera before, decided to take a picture of a cliff beside us. His flash went off, and at the exact moment we heard something roar/scream at us. I have spent most of my life in the outdoors, and I have never heard of an animal that could make such a noise. We immediately ran and got to my car, where the passenger took images out of the window. As I checked the camera of my friend to see what he shot, the image number was deleted off the camera somehow. He assured us that he doesn't know how to work a camera, let alone delete an image. As we got home, we checked the second camera and found a figure standing at our location of the noise with glowing eyes, hunched behind a bush. The figure was gone in the following images. After research of the area, we found out that there have been many weird sightings in the woods, as well as a cult ritual site in the 70s being tucked away into the mountains in the general area. We decided to go back the following weeks and found a cave with a stack of wood and a backpack that was ripped apart. We noticed a rock formation depicting one from the Blair Witch Project. My friend, trying to be funny, knocked it over. We returned a mere 25 minutes later to find every stone smashed into smaller pieces. Definitely not done by our friend, who was with us the entire time. Again we came back with larger groups, mostly girls who were trying to get scared because that's what high school kids do. When we reached the caves, we proceeded to take selfies. After returning to the truck, all of the images on our phones were deleted except the image of the entire group from behind. I know this is far reach to believe, but the girls involved never spoke to us again to this day. We hadn't returned for quite a while. However, we did go to the lodge in the mountains for hot chocolate one night a few months ago. We passed the area and a car was parked on the side of the road, which we thought was just strange for a weekday around 11 p.m. to midnight. The following day, a story broke out on the news of a body of a man being found off the road covered by rocks. His car was the car we passed. A few weeks ago, we decided to go to our spot and just take pictures again to survey the area. Throughout the session, we noticed a figure off in the distance, but figured it was our imaginations. Of course, being scared in the dark forest will mess with you. We pulled up the images that night and found what appears to be something walking parallel to us in the distance. Again, the last time we went out, this being a few weeks ago, we drove a dirt road back into the mountains and got out a few times to survey. Eventually, we came across an abandoned barn with a sign that read "Invitations Only." As we drove away, a car caught up with us, and a man, who looked to be wearing a gown of some sort, asked us what we were doing and if we were okay. To which we told him we were just hikers. As we made our way home, a friend of mine said he couldn't find his wallet, so we concluded he dropped it when we stopped on the dirt road and got out. We came back the next day and hiked in the mountains to find his wallet, which we thankfully did, but found it was chewed up. Not relating to the story much, but still interesting.